Okay, now you're done playing for the day. It's important to put the instrument away with a lot of care. We're going to basically do the opposite in order of how we assemble the instrument. So the last thing that went on was the reed. It's the first thing that's going to come off. So I'm going to loosen the ligature, but I'm not going to take the ligature off. And I'm going to take that reed, slide it from behind. It's important that, especially as you're removing it from the mouthpiece, that you do not touch the tip at all. Since that's the first thing that kind of comes up above the mouthpiece, it might be very tempting to just grab the tip and pull that out. But because the tip is so fragile, and when it's damaged, we don't get a very good sound. It doesn't, work very well. So you have to be careful to grab the reed sort of in the lower part of it. And put the reed very gently away in a reed case. So notice I'm taking my time. I'm not being hasty. All right. The next thing is that we're going to take the ligature and the mouthpiece off. And by storing the mouthpiece with the ligature on it, with the cap on it, it also protects a very essential part of the instrument, that mouthpiece. Now, before we do any further disassembly, we're going to leave it assembled in order to clean it. So this is going to get into a little bit about some of the other equipment that we have in the case. So it's important because we're putting moist, warm air through the instrument and that there's condensation on the inside of the bore of the instrument. It's important to clean that out. If there's a lot of moisture while the instrument is being stored, it will kind of collect on the pads that you can see on the keys, and that deteriorates the pads pretty quickly. So what we're going to do is take the instrument without the mouthpiece. We're going to turn it upside down so that the bell is at the top. Your swab is basically a piece of cloth attached to a string with a weight. The weight is what is going to go down the instrument first. You want to make sure that the string or the ribbon is not tangled or knotted in any way. And you put that weight down the bell. It goes pretty easily. And then your piece of cloth, which might be felt or cotton, you want to also make sure that that's not wadded up in any way. So you're going to open that up. And the string has already come through the bottom here, and you're just going to gently pull it through, maybe once or twice, depending on how long you've been playing. So I'm doing the same thing, just putting it gently in the bell and taking the cloth, pulling it through. This is really important, a very important step. And when you're in a hurry, your mom's waiting in the car and you're trying to put things away quickly, this is an important step not to skip, because it'll help your instrument last and play longer without having to do a lot of extra repair. Okay, one thing to look out for is the possibility of this swab getting stuck inside your instrument. Now, if you're making sure that the ribbon or the string is not tangled and this is kind of open here, that's a good way to prevent this from happening. But every so often, it can get stuck. One of the things to remember is that the inside of your instrument is fragile too, and you don't want to do anything to damage the inside. So this is not the time to get Dad's toolbox out and get a screwdriver and try to get the swab out from using hardware. One of the ways that you can think about removing it is see if you can figure out where in the instrument it might be stuck. And then you can actually disassemble the instrument and isolate that particular joint. So I'm going to set this aside. Another thing you want to do is try to condense the space that the swab is taking up. And I do that by just twisting the end of the string so that it makes the swab get smaller inside. And sometimes that can be just enough to jar it away. It's important to just be really gentle. If, after all of those things, you still cannot get the swab out, then you must take the clarinet to a repairman, go to a woodwind technician. They have some very good tools that are very helpful in getting the swab out without damaging the inside of the instrument. You might also consider, if your swab is really old, it makes it easier for that to get wadded up. And you might even think about evaluating the material of the swab. If it's a small piece of felt, those are usually easier to get stuck inside. And something where there's a little bit more material that's more open, something like a handkerchief or a cloth, that usually comes through the instrument quite smoothly. Just like we said before, we're going to take things off in the opposite order of how we put them together. So the first thing that comes off is the barrel. You'll find that your case has very specifically shaped holes inside. It's sort of like a puzzle to try to match up the shape of your piece of the clarinet to the specific hole. That's kind of important because if they're in the wrong hole, then the case, when it's closed, might damage some of those keys. So take some care to make sure this is being put together and put away properly. So now we have our palm in our right hand going to cover the ring keys of the top joint. I'm going to hold the bottom joint somewhere near the bottom, and I'm going to twist back and forth and pull out gently. That way I've lifted that one key that goes across the joint so that it doesn't rub against the bottom one while I'm trying to take it apart. And it's important also to remember that you're going to go back and forth because this particular joint is going to have some keys that will hit each other if you go all the way around. And again, those keys can be kind of fragile. You don't want to bend anything. So the back and forth pulling out is really important. So the upper joint goes in the upper joint hole in the case. Now we take apart the bell from the lower joint. Put the lower joint in the case with the thumb rest going down into that deep hole. And your bell in its spot. There we go. You want to close your case and make sure that the latches are really secure. Otherwise, guess what happens? It all falls out. I'm ready to go home.